Hi, I'm Brad with Custom Septic. I'm here with Phil, who had some questions about the Minnesota compliance inspection and kind of what we look for. So I'm going to let him ask some questions and I'm going to give some answers. So let's start her up.
All right. Thanks, Brad. First question is why in the heck do I even need this inspection? Or for instance, why would I be looking to possibly even have an inspection if I was going into a potential purchase of a home?
That's a good question. The reason being is that, well, in most of the county, not the whole state, but most of the counties in Minnesota, they have at point of sale, when a property changes hands, they have to have a compliance report done that's stating that the septic is in compliant. To try to better our environment because we are the land of 10,000 lakes and we don't want to be polluting that lake water. And they want to make sure that everybody's septics are up to grade the way they should be. They also want to, now that the counties that don't have that, still a lot of times your lenders are asking for that too, because they don't want to see somebody buy a house. And let's say they spend $200,000 on a house and 3 months later, they find out they need a new septic and the septic's, another $15,000. Now the people are in over their head and can't afford it or have to get another loan. And so they're trying to keep it so that the value is equal to what the home is worth.
That'd be a great reason to get an inspection. As far as the inspection goes, what are the things you are going to need from me as far as information?
Well, basically, I need whose name we want to put the paperwork in for the certification, whether it be yours. Sometimes we even use a realtor's name if they're representing a buyer or a bank-owned property. Otherwise, the address and everything pretty much follows the address though anyway. So if we put the property in the name of your dog, it wouldn't make any difference to anybody because they're going to be looking at the address and say this address, the system is compliant or non-compliant. So name, address, phone number, and then on my end, on the front page, we have to have my credentials, which is my name, address, phone number, business name, license number, and certification number.
Quick question about how long have you been in business and doing this?
27 years now.
That's quite a bit. So I decided to have a client, a septic inspection, and you're going to come out, and what's one of the first things you're going to do then?
Well, the first thing we do is we talk to you and get an idea of how many bedroom home you have. That's not on the compliance form, but we kind of like to keep track of how many bedrooms it is because that determines how large the system needs to be. One of the criteria for it anyway. And so we check that and then we talk to you about if the system is ever backed up in the home or if it ever froze up or if you've ever had any problems. Then the next thing we do is we go out into the yard and we look around and we make sure that we don't smell sewer in the yard. We look for any wet spots. We look for any place where it might be pushing up or ponding. We look inside the different components of the septic system. And what we're doing is we're looking for just any place where the water level would be higher than it should be. Or
Okay.
like I said, a puddle in the yard is obvious. I mean, some of those things are pretty obvious. That's the first thing we do.
All right. So something like that would, you say if you saw something like that, is that something that I could wait to fix, or would that be an immediate situation?
Well, okay, when we talk about that's kind of a tricky question. Because if you're selling the home, you're probably going to want to get it fixed right away. Or if you do sell the home, let's say it's winter in Minnesota, and you can't obviously put in a septic system in the middle of winter and it needs a new system. So they escrow the money. So you still go through with the home sale, but what they'll usually do is escrow 1.5 times the money. So in other words, if the system is going to cost $10,000, they would put $15,000 aside when they sell the house. Then the title company usually holds on to that. And then when the septic is installed in June, let's say, then they give me a check for the 10,000 and they give the homeowner, the original homeowner, his money back, which would be the 5,000 that he would get back. And that's how they handle that part in the winter. But when you do have a septic system that has an eminent health hazard, because it's Minnesota and we have winter, they give us 10 months in which to get it up to code, to
Okay,
get it fixed.
okay. So the other things that I have questions about, it's like how does a system work, and what are the other things you're checking out?
Okay, well, the next thing that we check is the tank, the septic tank. And we'll get into how it works all together in a few minutes here, but we'll go what we're going to check. And we have the tank pumped because they changed the code about 3 years ago where we have to actually pump the tank, look inside, and we're looking for cracks. And we have a slide here of that tank. And as you can see, we drew a little crack in the side so you could see what it would look like, what we're looking for. In the bottom, it shows that there's some water in there, but obviously that would all be pumped out and sucked out of the tank. And we would look for holes in the bottom of the tank. Then the other thing we look at is on each end of the tank, these little black things on each end are called baffles. Those baffles help to keep the sewer. So when you flush the toilet and water comes in, the first inlet baffle keeps it so it doesn't stir the tank around so much, the water in there, so the bacteria can grow, because part of this eating up the toilet paper and the solids and stuff is done by bacteria. Then the outlet baffle keeps it so that when we have our scum layer on the tank, which is the top layer that builds up from soaps and oils and greases and things, so that doesn't float out into the drain field and plug up the drain field. So we look for those baffles to make sure that those are intact and functioning. Then the other thing we do is, because we have to dig down to find the manhole cover sometimes, we like it to put risers on. Now the riser is shown right here in this black pipe that goes up, and it brings that manhole cover that would be buried underneath the ground up to grade. Now, in 2011 and newer, they made a code that they all have to be at grade, which is where the grass level is, where we can just walk up, lift them up, and access the tank when we have to. Some of the older ones, they were buried, and so I strongly recommend, if you have us dig that up, that you put a riser on top of it, because it's the only way that your pumper is going to get a chance to pump the tank properly. And you should have your tank pumped every 2 to 3 years to clean out the sludge layer, which is the stuff that falls to the bottom, and that scum layer that we talked about. And we want to get rid of all of that stuff. And to do it properly, you can't do it properly pumping through a 4-inch pipe. You have to get that 2-foot manhole cover open so that you can use a scraper and scrape the sides out and clean it. And that's also how we inspect it. So we strongly recommend you have that riser, hire us to put a riser on for you while we are there. It'll be cheaper than having us come out at a different time.
So that's what I'm seeing in my yard, is this little white pipe or something like that sticking out of the ground. That would be an inspection pipe for a tank.
Correct. Well, sometimes they have those inspection pipes for drain fields too. They also have them. I shouldn't say sometimes. They're supposed to be there, but a lot of times by the time we get there, people have cut them off flush with the ground. And if you can do that, but make sure you know where it is, either measure it or mark it. And if you're going to go below the ground, which you shouldn't, but if you do, you should glue a metal washer on it so somebody can find it with a metal detector if you have to. Because those inspection pipes in the drain field and on the tank are very important and helpful to find the tank
Okay.
and to find the drain field and to inspect certain things in there that we look for.
Okay, so now you looked at the septic tank, and what other things are you going to go ahead and inspect once you look at the tank?
Well, we talked about the collector tank, but in some systems, the basic, very basic system that we've been talking about has primarily been a gravity trench system. But sometimes we end up with a situation where it's too close to the water table, or they have to put the septic system on the other end of the house. So we add on another tank to that, which is called a lift station. And that lift station has a pump in there, and it pumps it up to the wherever it has to the drain field. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this is one of the things that we inspect in there is we uh, pull the float. There's some floats in there, one that turns the pump off and on. And we lift that float. We make sure that the pump float works, along with physically looking for the cracks and things. But we also, in the tank, but what we do is we are looking for the pump to make sure that it works. And then we try to test the alarm as well. There's an alarm float because it's designed, if that pump quits working, that the water level will get higher, and there's a high water alarm, which will go off in the house. So if the high water alarm ever goes off in the house, you call a septic person immediately. Anyway, So
So
that's
if
what
I,
we look for in the lift station.
quick question. So I would know if I had a lift station because I'd have the alarm in the house then?
You would have an alarm in the house. The other thing that you would have outside, you usually will have an electric post by your septic tank, some type of an electric post, and like 99% of the time. It'll be a wooden post or a plastic post, and it'll sit right by the, close to the manhole that goes down to the pump station or the lift station.
So do I need to have the electric inspected out there then?
No, we do a basic inspection when we are there to look for anybody that maybe somebody caught the wires with a weed whipper and damaged the wires, or if the dog pulled them, dragged them out. We've had that happen before. We've actually had dogs unplug them because the wires weren't secured properly. And we also look at the electric box just to make sure that it's the right type and that it's secured so a little kid can't get in there and get electrocuted.
Gotcha. All right, so this pump goes ahead and um pushes water out into, you were saying, my what was the word that you used for it?
Well, basically, it's
My
going to push it
drain
up.
field. My
Yep, it's
drain
going to
field.
push it up to the drain field, and that's a different type of drain field usually. We can talk about those a little bit later, but there's probably 3 or 4 basic types, and then there's variations of those types.
Okay.
But we
So
don't need to get into
regardless,
those
yeah,
right now.
regardless of type, when you're inspecting a drain field, what are you looking for in regard to that?
Good question. Okay, what we do is we first go out and we find the drain field. We try to get see if there's any sketches available through the county or city that has anything that shows when they put it in, where it was. That's called an as-built, which is as it was built, where did they put it? And they're supposed to have dimensions written down that show us where it is. And if that's there, that's great. Otherwise, either way, we have to still probe the ground and find, let's say, in this case, we'll say the rock bed or rock trenches. Then once we find that, then we keep probing through that rock till we push through it and it turns into sand again. And now we know we're at the bottom of that rock bed. Okay. That rock bed, another name for that is called the distribution media, if you hear that mentioned any place. So your distribution media or rock bed, because it can be made out of other material, but 90% of them are made out of rocks. So we get down to the bottom of that rock bed. Okay. Then we take a measurement there, and let's say that that measurement is 2 feet to the bottom of the rock bed. So then we write that down on a piece of paper. Then we go 10 feet away from the drain field area, try to stay on the same contour, and we will do a soil boring. And what we're looking for in that soil boring is the water table. And we don't look for the water table as in spring, it would be one level, and fall, it's going to be a different level. So we aren't looking for water.
Question for you real quick.
Sure.
My well is like 45 feet deep or something like that. So, I mean, wouldn't that be enough separation?
No, that's a different water table. That's an aquifer. That's way down underneath. That's your drinking water. What we're talking about is what we call groundwater, which comes from when it rains and then it gets down to a certain level. And when we hit that level, what we're looking for, like I said, when we're doing those soil borings, we're looking for that water table, but we aren't looking for water. We're looking for colors in the soil that are water indicators. Because at different times in the year, the water level gets higher or lower. And you can, because it varies, if it sits there long enough to leave these water indicators that tell us that that's where the water table is, then we know that's where the water table is. So we write down that number. And let's say that that number is 5 feet. So we said that the bottom of our distribution media rocks was at 2 feet, and our water table is at 5 feet. That means we have 3 feet of separation. When we talk about separation in a system, that's what we're talking about. And if 3 feet of separation, that system would pass. If we have less than 3 feet of separation, the system fails. Now there's two exceptions to that. They gave us a 15% rule, where that because of with certain type systems, they will settle a little bit. So instead of having 36 inches of separation, we can have 15% less, which is about 31.5 inches. So that would still be acceptable. In most counties accept that. that 15% rule, not all of them, but most of them.
So
Now, the
that's
other-
just for the inspection. Like if
Correct.
needed to have a new system put in, would they allow for that 15% too?
No, you have to have the 36 inches, the 3 feet at the time of installation. Has to be. Okay, they're allowing for settling of the ground and things that you may not, you
For a
know,
pre-existing system.
this is all pre-existing inspection, correct? Now, the other exception is in April of 1996, anything that was older than that, they only required 2 feet of separation. So those people were grandfathered in at 2 feet of separation. Anything April 1996 and newer has to have 3 feet of separation.
Okay.
So
The separation that they talk about, why do we need that much separation?
that separation is the soil needs to filter the sewer water that has all that bacteria and bad stuff in it so that it takes out those pathogens and it makes it safe to drink again.
Okay. So these soil borings, am I gonna have holes all over my yard or?
Yeah, it's about a 3 inch hole usually when we can do soil borings, and then we fill them back up when we're done. And so, no, you don't. The dirt in it might settle. You might have to touch it up a little bit, but for the most part, we put the dirt back in the hole and we pack it down the best we can. Now, sometimes though, if we get in a rocky area, we sometimes have to bring out a mini excavator because we can't get the soil boring tool through. So then in that case, we come out with a mini excavator and then we dig a hole in the yard, probably 2 feet wide by 6 feet deep. 2 feet wide by 6 feet deep. Sorry about that. And so when we do that, when we're done, we fill that hole also. But sometimes we have to do that because we can't get a soil boring tool through.
Yeah, what are you looking for in a soil boring then?
We are looking for colors in the soil. The colors in the soil are the water indicators, as I talked about. I'll give you a couple of quick examples. If you take a look at the slide here, you're going to see we have our different colors of soil. We have our green grass on top, then we have our um, black soil, which would be our black dirt, which is our organic, which comes from the leaves that die and everything. It builds up over the years to give us that black soil. Then after that, in this case, in these cases that I'm going to show you, we're going to call it sand. And so we got a layer of sand, and we have a book that the state gives us. It's called a Munsell color book, and it's a paint chip book that has paint chips in it with different colors of soils. We have to match up that color of the soil, and then we would write it down. For instance, this would probably be a soil like we'd call this a 10YR, which is on that page. It's a 10YR page, and it would be a 4-4 soil, 4-4, because we have two different lines we go through and cross, and it shows up there. Anyway, don't want to get into too much detail with that. But so as we get down and we get farther down, now we've got this soil here on the bottom that has these orange spots in it. Those orange spots are a mineral deposit, kind of like a sink that drip water and you got that rust spot in it. It'll give you that mineral deposit just like that in the soil. And when we start to run into those type things, that's where we say that's the water level. So we draw a line and say that's our water level. So we have to go 3 feet above that. And then that's where we determine what type system is required when we're doing a new one. But in this case, we go 3 feet above that and make sure that our rock bed we got that 3 feet of separation.
If it's after 1996, did you say?
April of 1996. If it's after that, we need 3 feet.
Okay.
Yes. Now, also one other thing, and there's a lot of rules. I'm not going to get into all the rules because it's just way too much to cover in a short video. But one of the rules there too, with the 2 feet of separation, April of 1996, if you are within 1,000 feet of a lake shore, you have to have 3 feet of separation no matter what. So it doesn't make any difference whether it's 2 feet there. But if you're out in the country away from the lake, then you can have 2 feet of separation, April 1996 or older. Okay. Like I said, there's a lot of rules and things you guys don't need to know. I'm just trying to get you a little bit of an idea. So you go, why did my system fail? What's going on and what's going to happen? I'm just trying to give you a little bit more of an update.
Okay. A question in regard to it has to do a little bit with the the inspection and stuff like that. So if I was purchasing a house and I was paying somebody to go ahead and go out and inspect this to tell me some things that I need to be looking for in the foreseeable future or something like that, what types of things would I want to ask a potential seller to find out information and stuff like that, so I know that this system is going to be healthy? How long does the system even last?
Okay, good question. It depends on how they're taken care of. Let's say somebody built a 4-bedroom home, but only 2 people live in it. So that means that system's gonna last a lot longer because it's way oversized for what they need. But on the same thing, let's say that mom and dad became grandma and grandpa, they got older and they had kids in the house on that 4-bedroom home and it was full most of the time. Then the last few years, grandma and grandpa decided they wanted to downsize, so they move out. And now the system's been used heavily. So it really is impossible for us to say how long it's going to last. But the average system of the older systems went 20 to 30 years. Of the newer system, a lot of them are still going, and we don't really have an answer for that because people are pumping them more often. They're made aware to pump them every 2 to 3 years. They
Oh,
have
so
learned
they're supposed to be pumped every 2 to 3 years then?
every 2 to 3 years. And then you're supposed to scrape your plate into the garbage or into the family dog dish, but don't scrape it down in the sink and try to get rid of your stuff off your food off your plate. Uh, don't put any chemicals in it. Try to keep um, you want to keep your greases out of it because they'll plug pipes and they'll cause you a problem. Um, and we have a whole list of things which will be on my website soon that'll show do's and don'ts of septics. And basically, if you follow the do's and don'ts and follow it carefully, your system will last quite a bit longer.
Okay. So the inspection happens. What happens after the inspection? What can I expect?
Oh, well, you'll get paperwork, and that's one of the things that I wanted to mention. You had asked also about questions to ask. On that paperwork for the compliance inspection, on the front page, there's a place where it has a brief description. And under each one of the things that we test, it has a brief description that we can write in there. And if we find a problem or something that's sketchy, we usually will put a note there, like under the brief description. Let's say that I have a septic system, it's working fine at this time, but it's 30 years old. I'm going to write down system 30 years old. um, we could see some signs of weakness, or if we see like the cement is starting to deteriorate, we're going to say it's holding water at this time. We pass it because it's legally we have to pass it because it's holding water, but there'll be a note there that says the cement is starting to deteriorate. So you want to look for those little things like that that are going to give you a clue of things that are coming in the near future.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anything else you could tell me that I need to know?
Well, there's a few things. One is when we talk about, everybody thinks that, well, how do I say that? When we do an inspection, they think it's like somebody's doing a car inspection and they jack up the car, take the wheel off and look at the brakes and say there's, 75% of the brake pad is there. So you've got 75% life left. With a drain field and septic system, we have no way of knowing that. Because we don't know how it was taken care of. There's no crystal ball to see anything. We can only tell you what it looks like at that time. That's a snapshot in life right now. We take the best notes we can, but it is not a guarantee that the system is guaranteed thumbs up and we're good forever. Doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, like I said, we take grandma and grandpa. They lived in the house, only 2 of them. They were only using 150 gallons of water every 2 days. Then they move out and a family of 8 moves into this 4-bedroom house. And now they're using 600 gallons every 2 days or every day. And now the system breaks 3 months later and they go, well, you guys inspected it. Yes, we inspected it, but we have no way of knowing how it was treated or how long it's going to last. The only thing that we can do that might help is if we can do a flow test on it, which is not mandatory at all, but sometimes we will do that. And the flow test is we basically take, if the system is supposed to handle 450 gallons a day, we'll put in like 200 gallons, 225 gallons into it. and we measure the liquid level and make sure that the liquid level is dropping and going away as we put the water in, and that it doesn't build way up. If it builds way up, the drain field is slowed way down, which means that it's not taking the water as it should, and that's going to mean that it's going to be failing in the near future. Now, that could be a month later, it could be 4 years later, but at least you kind of got a little bit of help to know. But other than that, there's really no way of knowing.
Okay. Well, I feel that my questions have been answered, and I'm sure that anybody else that has questions, they could go ahead and leave questions in the comments below, or definitely go ahead and give you a call. What's the best way to contact you?
Best way to contact me is by phone or by email. Email is brad@customseptic.com. Very simple. brad@customseptic.com, or you can call me at 763-218-4769.
All right. Thank you.
Yep, thanks. Have a nice day.
All right.